Kia ora koutou. Welcome to everybody. We're going to start our hui off with karakia, which I'm happy to do on behalf of our Policy and Planning Committee meeting today. Inoi o te kaunihira o Rangitike. E hoa o ngā mano tēnei ngā mema o te kaunihira o Rangitike, te whakahoki atu nei I te reo whakamoemiti mō ngā manaakitanga, I whiwhi nei mātou I roto I ngā mahi pai o tēnei rohe. Manaki tia hoki mātou I roto I ngā take kei runga I tō mātou tepu, I roto o mātou nei hui. O tira e iho o ngā mano homai piki te ora, piki te kā, piki te maramatanga me te rangi Mārie, kia mātou ngā tangata, ngā iwi katoa kei raro I o mātou aroaro, nō reira ko te tūmanako ka mahi tahi mātou I raro I te kotahitanga o ngā iwi katoa kei raro I a mātou. Amen.
Amen.
So welcome everybody to our Policy and Planning meeting for Thursday the 11th of April 2024. We've got, just before we start into the apologies, I'd like to welcome and just acknowledge Councillor Dalgety and Councillor Wong who are joining us today and will be commenting through this hui, I'm sure. You have the opportunity to do that, and also to the rest of the members, Councillor Duncan, Councillor Morn, Councillor Wilson and Councillor Richard Lambert. So welcome everybody. I'd also like to welcome our team, our staff, Katrina who's standing in today, or Carol who's away, Kezia, Jenna, Tiffany and also of course Gayleen. So welcome to our team as well. Oh, aroha mai. And also of course, I forgot about you because you're still, and of course Jared Culkin, who is our Economic Development person. So welcome to the table. Apologies for not acknowledging you to start with. We do have two apologies received from His Worship the Mayor in Chris Shenton. So I'd like to move those apologies and ask for a seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Morn. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Carried. Public forum. We do not have a public forum today. No, so we can move past that. Everybody understands the conflict of interest declaration. So if anyone has any conflicts of interest, you can declare them now, or else when we get to that kaupapa on the agenda, then I'm happy for us to put that out at that time. Moving forward, confirmation of order of business. Have we got anything else to put in? Okay, nothing else. All right, we can move forward from that. 6, the confirmation of the past minutes. For those that were at that meeting, we're happy to go through the minutes page by page, starting from page 1. Can I just make sure that people have a look at to see who was present, because this has been an issue in the past where people have been thought that they have been present and they haven't been recorded. Yes, Councillor Duncan.
Page 9. This is just nitpicking really, but it says the Chair's report was taken as read, but I believe you read it on Zoom at that meeting.
Correct. Can I just ask? Okay, thank you. Thank you for that, Councillor Duncan. So we went up to 9, but we might just come back to 1. Anything on page 1 that needs amending? So I'm saying page 1, but it's actually page 8. Page 9, we've had that one issue from regarding the Chair's report. Page 10. Page 11. And page 12.
We moved here that they be a true and correct record of the meeting held on the 15th of February 2024. Happy to second.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Wilson and seconded by Councillor Lambert. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Reports of information. You have got my written report, so I'll just read that out. Tēnā koutou katoa, in acknowledgement to those councillors who made the review of terms of reference workshop earlier today, and also a welcome back to our Deputy Chair, Councillor Jill Duncan, who's been away tramping in the South Island. I'd also like to thank Councillor Duncan for stepping into the Chair's role at the February meeting due to my attendance online via Zoom. He mihi mahana ki a koe. There's much to be done in the policy space, and I'd just like to thank our communities who have put in submissions, not only for the 2024-2034 long-term plan, but also in other areas of consultation and feedback, such as the draft revenue and financing policy, the draft rates for emission policy, the draft significance and engagement policy, and also the draft development contributions policy. All of these submission dates closed off on the 7th of April. So again, many thanks to those that took part. Ensuring we have robust and workable policies that ensure we keep within the law, comply with the many rules and regulations that sit alongside local government can be mind-boggling at times, but that is the environment we work in. Again, an interesting agenda for us today that will include urban growth, strategy, plan development and review update, policy bylaw work program update and bylaw review, an economic wellbeing update, and a discussion around submissions into the Horizons Regional Council 2024-2034 long-term plan. The following whakatauki encompasses what an optimum outcome can achieve, and in essence means people being able to work together to achieve their goals. Whakatauki, mā whiro, mā pango, ka oti te mahi. By black and red together, the work is done. Many hands make light work. Ngā mihi mahana. If there's no questions, thank you very much. I'd like to move my report and ask for a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Duncan. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Hilda. Now, we're moving on to next part of business. As reports for decision, 9.1, and so we are looking at the policy bylaw work program update. No, we're not. Because I'm looking at the wrong bit. Yeah, thank you. 7.2, sorry. Sorry, just looking over it a little bit too fast for more. 7.2, urban growth, plan change, efficiency and effectiveness monitoring update. So, Tiffany Gillar, you're going to take us through this. Oh, Zelda, and Tiffany.
This wasn't enough.
Yeah, it's down there.
7.2.
Page 14.
Oh, thank you very much.
Right, for her to find the page.
Thank you.
The report is read, and what I'm going to do is just walk you through a presentation really, because that'll be most helpful.
Thank you,
I
Tiffany.
thought. Read. The arrow. Oh, yeah, there we go, sorry. So just a brief overview, what we're looking at. I'll touch on the RMA hierarchy of planning just as a reminder, what a district plan is just as a reminder, and I'll move through those quickly. And then I'll focus in on what is the purpose of efficiency and effectiveness monitoring, our district plan context for monitoring, key indicators, key takeaways, and then next steps. So hierarchy of planning, and this is the RMA hierarchy, and I do acknowledge we're all expecting this to be reformed, but we're working on what we've currently got. Is effectively you've got the RMA at the top, you've got your national direction, which is your national policy statements, your national environmental standards, you drop down to the regional policy statement, regional plans, and then district plan, which is what we're looking at today and what we're responsible for. So territorial authorities, being us or city councils, prepare district plans while taking into consideration specific values and needs of communities. District plans are prepared under the RMA and they must give effect to your national direction and your regional directions, so you can't be inconsistent with the higher level documents basically. District plans are your primary document for managing land use and development within the district. They identify they identify issues, objectives, policies, and then they split a district into zones. So we've got commercial, rural, residential, rural living, educational and industrial in our district plan. Efficiency and effectiveness monitoring. So we are required to monitor our district plan in terms of its efficiency and effectiveness. We're required to do so under Section 35 of the Resource Management Act. Basically, we're required to gather information, monitor that, and keep record. And then we are required to release that to the public once we've done that. We're required to do this exercise at 5-year intervals. And effectively what it's looking at is whether the council's district plan is performing as expected. So are the provisions achieving the outcomes that we wanted them to achieve when we put them in place? And our current district plan was put in place in 2013. So council undertook an efficiency and effectiveness monitoring in 2019. And it was a state of environment report, but focusing on efficiency and effectiveness. It looked at the full district plan. It included recommendations for possible changes for the entire district plan. This monitoring was high level and it didn't really dive into detail and it did not review consent data. The context for this review was, it was basically a different environment. So we weren't in that high growth environment that we've been in the last couple of years. Efficiency and effectiveness monitoring is a useful tool for informing plan changes or a district plan review. And so effectively what I've been doing is an efficiency and effectiveness monitoring of the residential and rural living zones in particular, which will inform proposed plan change 3, council's urban growth and plan change. So I haven't looked at the whole district plan. I've focused in on those 2 zones. And the purpose of that is to really use that information to inform the plan change that I'm working on. Officers will go through this exercise for other plan changes, looking at other areas. So your rural zone, you can do the exercise again, basically. The monitoring, you look at it broadly. So you look at your national, regional and district context. And then I have developed key indicators to facilitate the assessment of these zones and how the provisions are performing. What the monitoring report will cover is we'll do a district profile, and I forgot to say, please feel free to stop me and ask questions at any point. Your district profile looks at your population overview, number of dwellings and household composition, median sale prices for dwellings, rental prices, ethnic makeup, iwi and hapu overview. And I've developed key indicators to assess the district plans and the assessments being done against our objectives and policies. Our district plan in terms of structure doesn't have like principal reasons, methods, environmental outcomes. Other district plans have those and they can kind of inform your indicators. Ours is quite simple and so it hasn't done that. So the only method that I have to test against is the objectives and policies basically. I have reviewed resource consent and building consent information for the rural living and residential zones over a 5-year period starting 1 January 2019 and finishing the end of last year. So I've gone through every consent and reviewed it basically. The key indicators that I have used to inform my assessment: available land zoned for development in our key towns and settlements, a number of building consents granted for dwellings being new builds and relocates, consented dwellings by location, number of subdivision consents granted, number of lots consented, size and shape of new residential lots, number of land use consents granted, types of non-compliances that were consented through the land use consent process, and approved and permitted boundary activities.
I have a question.
Yep.
So when you say size and shape factor, what do you mean by factor?
Yep, so a shape factor requirement, and this varies across the board, is when you are subdividing a lot, we have what's called a shape factor requirement in our district plan, and it is a 15-metre diameter circle. So basically, if you're proposing a new lot, you show that it can comply with that. You put your circle in the middle, it's a visual thing, and that you can comply with the 15-metre diameter circle. And the purpose of that is because generally people aren't designing houses at the same time when they're undertaking the subdivision. It shows that a standard house could fit on that lot. And really it's just showing that
Practical measure.
yeah, it's just a practical measure. If you don't comply with the shape factor requirement, generally what a planner would require you to do is to show that a house could fit on the lot effectively.
So is it a minimum size?
Yep,
thing?
it's a minimum kind of shape. So that the purpose of the circle is to show like that an average dwelling, an average size kind of 3 to 4 bedroom dwelling could fit on that lot without them having to show the design of it basically.
Thank you.
So we'll move through each of the key indicators and the results that I got based on the assessment that I did. Starting with available land zoned for development in our key towns or settlements, and those are Martin, Bulls, Taihape, Hunterville, Mangaweka and Turakina, as these were identified as areas that are growing under the council's community spatial plan. And that they have also indicated that there's a shortfall in either or both of residential or rural living zone available land in the short, medium or long term. The community spatial plan, which Katrina obviously developed with you, looked at criteria for what is considered to be available land. And that is, it's zoned, it's sufficient size to be developed, it was either vacant or underdeveloped, so it could be a large piece of land and only have one house on it and have the ability to have multiple houses on it. And it's not affected by or subject to a significant constraint. And a significant constraint example would be like a major natural hazard. Number of building consents granted for dwellings and locations. So you will see the table that I've got there is the residential zone. New and relocated dwellings between that 5-year period, which is 1 January 2019 to the end of last year, saw 194 new builds. I can circulate this.
Thank you, I know some don't want that.
Yeah. So new builds, 194, relocate 74, and you will notice that of those, 195 were located in Martin, 61 were located in Bulls, and just 11 were spread across your other residential zoned areas. So a total of 279 were consented over this period, and only 3 of those were in the rural living zone. Subdivision consents, so 92 over the 5-year period. You had your biggest years in 2020 and 2022 in terms of your consent numbers. That table only shows your residential zone. In the rural living zone, there was only two subdivisions consented over that 5-year period. In the residential zone, of the 92 subdivision consents, 58 were in Martin, 25 were in Bulls, 7 were in Taihape, and 2 were in Hunterville. Number of lots consented. So of your subdivision consents, so your 92 that were consented in the residential zone, 552 lots were consented, with your biggest years again being 2020 and 2022, with quite a significant increase in those years in comparison. Over the same period, only 3 lots were created by a subdivision in the rural living zone. So size of lots, and I basically looked at an average size of lot and excluded a balanced lot. And so a balanced lot is anything that's over 5,000 square meters. So in a subdivision, you might have, say, a hectare of land. They may have taken half of that, developed it for residential purposes, so of a standard residential site, but saved the other half for a future development. I've just discounted that lot because it's actually not a residential lot and just focused on the residential sized lots by that 5,000 square meters. So excluding your balance lots, you've got an average or mean size of 733 square meters, or your mean or your mode, which were the same at 585 square meters, which suggests that our minimum lot size in the district plan is 400 square meters. And I would say it's fairly appropriate in terms of the size of lot that we're seeing developed residentially. So of the 552 residential lots that were consented, only 37 of those were less than 400 square meters, which is a relatively small percentage. And I've given you a breakdown of when those were consented. And also just as a guidance, general bit of guidance, 34 of those undersized lots were between 250 square meters and 400 square meters, and only 3 were kind of between the 200 and 250. Yeah.
So those undersized lots, they have to go through another consenting process to.
It's not
under
necessarily another consenting process, so it's all bundled in the one consent.
Yeah.
But what happens is, say you're applying for a consent for an undersized lot, it flips it into a different activity status, so it's a harder process to go through. But our district plan does provide a pathway in terms of the policies. It directs that basically, if you're going to have an undersized lot, you just have to prove to us that it's not affecting the character or amenity of the site or the surrounding areas. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Is that sufficient enough? Do we need to have some safeguards in place about this minimum lot size?
I would say, I guess where I landed with this is you've actually got a relatively low demand. Only 34 out of 552 lots were undersized. And that kind of indicates probably one of two things. Either there isn't the demand, or people have a perception that it's not going to get through the process. From my time in consenting, what I would say is it's not the latter. Because I didn't get a lot of pre-application meetings that were showing undersized lots. And generally, actually, the undersized lots were your infill, concentrated around your town centres that were basically going to be used for your smaller units, so your 2-bedroom units that are close to town.
The subdivision that comes to mind, and I just would be interested in approximately what size those lots are, is the one opposite the church and the Bulls School, the corner site there where there's a lot of houses.
400, I would have to go from memory.
And so like, if we were waving the perfect wand.
Yeah.
Is that type of subdivision desirable?
Oh, I mean, it really depends on what you're aiming for.
Yeah.
The reality is somebody's put that in place and
Yeah.
those lots have been sold and the houses have been developed, so it suggests that it's met a demand. I don't believe they were undersized.
No, 4 to 500.
Yeah,
4
4
to
to 500. Yeah.
Thank you.
If you've got a hectare garden, it
Yeah.
makes it look small.
Councillor Lambert.
Wait, so one quick question, like people who fail consents, like does that figure, like that's failed, you can't do it, like if someone fails, do they come back and change
We've
something?
actually never declined a consent.
Yeah, so
in my
you work your way
life.
through it.
So what usually happens is somebody will come to us with a pre-application meeting. And what I'd say is, and I mean, I was consent planning here for a couple of years, so I do have a good understanding of what came across my desk. Is we didn't get a lot of people proposing undersized lots. But if they do, it's not a no, it's a, we look at it, we tell them our initial thoughts and whether it's not going to be okay or it is going to be okay. And if it wasn't going to be okay, what they could do to change to make it okay. Because it's not our job to hold up development, it's really our job to just make sure the type of development that's occurring is appropriate in our context.
I
Any
don't,
other questions?
maybe just for clarity, so I think my son was one of those that actually applied for an undersized lot.
Mhm.
And it did take longer, there was a bit more to work through. But yeah, the process was, I felt it was quite thorough.
And what I would say, and what I'm going to suggest, is we currently have a flat 400 square metres, except for the Taihape West zone, sorry. But we'll exclude that because actually, you know,
You can't build there at the moment anyway.
it's got its other challenges.
Yeah.
So we'll exclude that.
Mm.
So your flat 400 across the board, there absolutely is a conversation to be had about council of how do we provide for those smaller lot sizes to get a greater variation. And my recommendation would be as you look around your town centres in Taihape, Martin and Bulls, and look to introduce like a medium density zone where you allow, say, you go down to 250 because that seems to be an appropriate size in terms of what I've assessed. And you draw that area around you where it's walkable to your shops, to open space, where you're targeting people that are probably, you know, an older couple or a couple without children that don't necessarily need the space, that want the ability to access your town centres and provide for those, and then the process becomes even more streamlined for them if they're within that area. Yeah.
Yeah, I think going forward, they'll become more and more popular. So it's really is something we should, like you say, be quite aware of.
Yep.
People change their living styles away.
And what I would suggest is by concentrating it in your key towns,
Yeah.
and then around your main centres, you're providing for it, and then you're still meeting your hierarchy in terms of you're more intensified around your town centres, and then you typically taper out to your rural zone. So you've got a transition basically to the rural zone. So your
But
larger
having,
lots will typically be
like
on
you
the
say,
edge of
century
town.
structure, then yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Wholeheartedly agree.
And just as a brief note, of the 552 lots consented, only 31 didn't meet the shape factor requirement, which suggests it's a generally appropriate.
Still appropriate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tiffany. Councillor.
Here's a left field question. Do we have a height restriction?
Yes,
Do we?
yes.
Yeah.
8 metres. So it's
Oh, so we
typically,
can't build a big tower.
so in
Build
the
a Martin.
residential zone, it's typically 8 metres, which is your 2-storey. You're basically facilitating. We could look to tweak that and allow high density for commercials at 10.
Something like that.
So your commercial is kind of 10, which is kind of 2 to 3 stories. Residential zone, it's the 2 stories, but we could look to tweak that for the medium density to allow 3 stories if you wanted to. I don't see huge
No.
number of even 2-story houses coming
Not big
through.
apartments like at the Mount or anywhere.
No.
Just on that, with any restriction that's in there, in our district plan, consent can be applied for, no matter what it might be.
Yeah, of course.
And you could run through a consenting process to try and enable what it is you're trying to do, regardless of whatever district plan rules
Yeah.
exist. Thank you. That's what
And
I
we'll
thought
work
was the
through
case.
the land use consents that we've got as well.
One more quick question. So if we were to change it from 2 stories to 3 in the residential, would that trigger consultation?
Yes.
Yeah.
All of any change will.
Any of those, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So the plan change process is prescribed, and that requires quite a few steps in terms of consultation, your pre-consultation and the informal consultation. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Number of land use consents. So 96 were approved over the 5-year period for the residential zone. We only had one that actually fall within both residential and rural living zone, which is a property that's actually split zoned. So 96 overall within residential zone. A land use consent is when somebody wants to use land in a way that doesn't comply with the permitted activity standard of a district plan. Anything that doesn't apply, you go through the land use consent process, and you can see the numbers are actually flat. Like there was an increase overall with a slight drop in 2023, but they're fairly static, like in the last 4 years anyway. And these are the most common types of land use consents granted in the residential zone. So it's not exhaustive, they're just the ones that were consistently coming out. It shows trends in terms of the type of consent and indicates where council could explore kind of possible amendments. What I would say is the 2 that have the asterisks, so your habitable room window and your 5-metre road boundary setback, that 28 number includes bulk consents. So they've been counted as one consent, but actually they were for a large number of lots all in one go. And if we were looking at them individually, those numbers would be in the hundreds. So just as a guidance.
Oh, good. Can I just ask what's established community activity? What does that mean?
So we've got a list of permitted activities in the residential zone, and a community activity isn't actually permitted in the residential zone. So if somebody's wanting to establish a community activity, and a community activity could be something like a school, a health centre, those types of activities, it's actually defined in the district plan what that activity is. They have to go through the resource consent process because it isn't permitted as of right. Deemed permitted boundary activities. This was something that was introduced in 2017, and it's basically a streamlined process. So it's an easier process to go through for any minor non-compliances that meet kind of what a boundary activity is. Where affected persons have given their approval. So if your neighbour, so say you're wanting to go closer to the boundary on one side and your neighbour says, yeah, here's my written approval, you go through this process, it's cheaper, it's faster, it's not a full resource consent process. Yeah. And that just kind of gives you again some guidance on the type of consents that are being processed through this. So you've got some ones that are fairly standard in terms of they're consistently being applied for your daylight setback, you have your room window and your setbacks. So just to kind of provide some key takeaways, this isn't everything. The report that I'm currently working on finalising has a much more robust number of recommendations, but effectively what the information has told me is that growth is highly concentrated around Martin and Bulls, and that as such we should be making sure that there's sufficient land zoned for residential development in these towns in particular. The rural living zone is not well utilised, and we should be making amendments to the provisions to increase development and better provide for that style of development within the zone. The minimum lot size of 400 square metres generally seems to be appropriate, but we should be exploring providing for smaller lots around our town centres. And then just as another note is, we only have a single residential zone with that 400 square metre minimum lot size. And is this suitable for unserviced settlements? And the point I make about that is the regional council requires 5,000 square metres for an on-site wastewater system. So where we have an unserviced town like Titakina, currently our district plan's indicating that they could go down to 400 square metres. Regional council's telling them they can only go down to 5,000 square metres
Or a
because they
septic
need to
system.
have,
Yeah.
they need to have an on-site septic system. Is it appropriate for our district plan to be setting people up for an expectation that can't be realised? Probably not. And I would suggest that we look at some form of zoning for those unserviced towns that better reflects their actual potential for development.
Is there a minimum, what are you calling it, rural living zone?
So it's 2 hectares.
Two.
Our minimum lot size for the rural living zone is 2 hectares, and what I would suggest is, given that our minimum lot size for a rural zone is 2 hectares, we should be looking to differentiate to provide that transition to the rural zone. We should be providing for a greater opportunity for development in our rural living zone, and that could be, I mean, it's something to test. Is it 5,000 square metres? Is it 2,000 square metres? If it's serviced, is it another number? And that's a discussion for us to have.
Yeah.
A question, so potentially you could have both those options?
Yes.
Yeah.
You could say 1 hectare, you could say 7,000 square metres, whatever feels right.
Service to unserviced makes a difference in the size.
It can, yeah.
Yeah.
If you want to explore that. I haven't landed on a,
From what you just said,
Proposed
though,
size.
that would be a sensible.
it's certainly something I can
Mm.
look at anyone introducing through. Yeah. Land use. So key takeaways is effectively most of our permitted activity standards appear to be suitable in terms of the number of subdivision, land use consents that are coming through. Very few are being issued with conditions other than general accordance, which tells me that they're generally suitable in terms of what we're trying to achieve. The consent data does indicate that our yard setback requirements should be tested and revised. So that's your 3 metre habitable room window, your 5 metre from the road boundary requirements, because we're getting a lot of consents in those spaces and we're consistently granting them. So it's suggesting that actually, do we require them? Do we want to amend them? And then also just as a note that some of we have that list of permitted activities up front. So it lists things like a residential activity, a number of visitor accommodation that's appropriate and therefore permitted in the zone. Probably requires some consideration around whether that currently works in our structure, whether there's additional activities that we want to permit in either the residential or the rural living zones. And an example that I've given is many of council's parks and reserves are currently zoned residential.
Mhm.
And although open space and sports and recreational activities are permitted, community activities and facilities are not. And that means that where you have an existing community facility and you're wanting to extend it, which we quite often do have those on our reserves, they're having to go through a consent process. And is that what we want them to be doing? Or do we want to be facilitating those better in those zones?
So I'm not quite sure how to ask this, but so what would be a better designation for our open space and sports recreation?
You have
Spaces.
options.
You do.
You have options. So you could choose to introduce a new zone and actually just zone your reserve land as open space or recreational reserve.
Yeah.
Create a new zone, create provisions that go with that zone, and that clearly indicates what you're expecting and anticipating in that zone. Or you can try and tamper with what you've got, which is it's currently zoned residential, but we're trying to facilitate a zone within the residential zone. So you'd have to look at what you could or should be permitting, recognising that across the board, say if I have a house, I could therefore have a community facility or a community activity or a recreation activity established there.
Yes,
As of
so
right.
that gets messy.
It does get messy, yes.
Further question? So, oh, sorry, my brain's gone a bit dead. So rather than, no, the question actually is, are there other councils that have such a thing as a open space and sports
Most do,
recreation
basically, yes,
separate
most do.
designation? So we could, so it would be easy to look at that and as an option.
Easy, in theory. Yeah, in theory. So it would streamline what we've got.
Yeah.
And I've certainly, so most first generation plans, well, a lot of first generation plans zoned it residential or rural or whatever. Second generation, which our plan is second generation plan. Typically when actually this doesn't work, we're going to introduce an open space or a recreation zone. We didn't do that at that point, but it doesn't mean that we can't do it now. It still has to go through a public process. So it's easy in theory unless there's a public interest that's contrary to all land kind of thing.
Yeah, so what we would look to do is run it as a separate plan change process in terms of implementing our open space zone. So easy in terms of theory, but quite a lot of work and behind the scenes to get it to fruition.
Thank you. We'll take a question from councillor Dalgety first.
Indicating yes, it's worth it, yeah.
You've kind of answered it. Why do you think they would have left it as our parks and reserves as a residential underzone?
To be honest, and I mean, I wasn't part of the district plan review, I wasn't here, so I can't 100% answer, but my assumption would be the review that was undertaken, they were basically trying to minimise the amount of work they did, streamline the plan and not spend a whole lot of time and money on it. And so I would suggest that it was just the simplest way to roll it over. Well, it was reflective of the need of the time in terms of what was brought into place, yes.
Yeah, I mean, if you think of the time, it was when council was doing fewer but better. It was that kind of slow decline context, so there wasn't the same demand for improving or extending community facilities as we have now.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Moore.
I'm gonna take another take on that. Would there be potential for residential on our parks and reserves?
Yes.
So I would be,
With a caveat, a lot of them are gazetted, so that creates a hurdle, basically.
because I wouldn't want to snooker a future council that might
And so what I
want
would,
to sell, sell off some land to fund a future, I don't know, keep rates down or whatever.
and what I would suggest is there's ways around that. So if you were looking to introduce a zone, what you could do is you've got to, I assume you have a property strategy or like a property strategy which identifies your core property that you're never going to do that to. And then I'd imagine it's got a list of potential opportunities. You'd focus that zone on the areas that you know are never going to, so if you gazetted reserves, you're not going to look to do that. And then there's other land that you could leave as residential for that purpose because, and not, I guess, stifle your
Because
future
I don't want
opportunity.
us to be a heritage New Zealand and somebody wants to go and sell off some future land and, oh no, it's zone parks and reserves, good, and it can't be done.
Yeah. So you can tailor it and simply apply the zone to your most strategic parks and reserves. Because I'd imagine that there's some that would just never be appropriate for urban development. Next steps is I'll be finalising the report. That will come to you in June. Once it has come to you, it will be made available to the public, which is a requirement of the legislation. And then that report will be used to inform the proposed changes to the residential and rural living zone in Plan Change 3, along with input from council in general, iwi, technical experts and other major stakeholders. So this is just kind of one slice of the pie in terms of what will inform how the plan changes develop.
So does that mean that we will not be making any changes to our rule zone? Or is this like the first chapter and then you come back to the rule zone?
So Plan Change 3 is focusing on your residential and your rural
Yeah.
living zones. Rural will be dealt with via a separate plan change. I
Okay.
haven't assessed it under the efficiency
That's-
effectiveness
yeah.
monitoring. It will go through its whole process.
Thank you.
Councillor Member.
Oh, just in this humble councillor's opinion, it will be a complex, I mean, it's all good, I agree, I think it's great, but you almost needs reviewing constantly with the way people's lifestyles change and their, what's considered, like used to quarter acre sections gone forever and all that sort of thing. So I'd really like it, but I'm just saying it's always going to be a moving beast more than it ever was, I think.
So what I would say is, because our plan change process is quite time and resource consuming.
Yeah, yeah, I don't-
Typically, there's a requirement for a 10-year review.
Yeah.
And typically that's what councils do because, and so what happens is you put in place and you try and think about where your trends are going, to provide for those opportunities. And when you don't provide for the opportunities, you end up with people going through the consent process and you just want to make sure that the consent process is achieving what the outcomes are that you're anticipating. So that in 10 years' time, when we redo this,
Yeah.
we can, you know, the conversation for the context of the time, and that's kind of how it
How it rolls, but I'm
progresses.
just saying, like, in 10 years' time, it's probably gonna be vastly, like, and there's never been much change, but it's gonna
It
be
was,
vastly.
it was a
Yeah.
completely different
But
landscape.
it's just BS, well, just,
Yeah. But what I'd say is obviously you've got RMA reform on top of that. and who
yeah,
knows what
exactly.
We will be landing, so.
Councillor Dalgety.
I'm just interested, one of my very chief frustrations is looking at the Manawatu and their growth in their lifestyle blocks. And around every corner I see a subdivision.
Yeah.
Which I do not see in our district, and I feel that we've missed that bus. And then the, the central government laws came along and made that even more difficult. Do you feel, in your experience, feel that it's our district plan that held that back before central government, changed the law?
What I would say is I mean, I haven't assessed the data. And obviously I've been planning here primarily during a time when the national policy statement was in play. So I don't think I can give justice and I'm looking at Katrina because she can jump in whenever. But what I would say is from my work in other councils, which is Hart, Horowhenua, from my knowledge of the Manawatu, if somebody had wanted to put through a rural lifestyle subdivision here of a sufficient scale and they had found the right piece of land to do it, I think that our district plan would have allowed that to happen. With it not being on 1 or 2 soils would be would have been.
So all those subdivisions are on 1 or 2 soils though. So what's
wouldn't-
gone wrong that we have not been able to experience that?
So I wouldn't say that all of those subdivisions are on 1 or 2 soils, because I know for a fact in Horowhenua, 1 or 2 soils is protected as strongly as it is here, if not more. But what I would say is,
In the Manawatu, I'm referring to probably.
what I would say is there are levers you can pull, and the fact that the rural living zone was developed and that is on class 2 soil.
Right.
The intention of council was to facilitate that level of development.
But
given
these
what size of
developments
2
are not
hectares.
happening on the fringe of town, which is where our rural living zones are. These are right throughout that whole district.
Yeah, and I guess some comment in terms of where our district plan landed after 2013 was a policy direction to protect class 1 and 2 soils with a minimum lot size of 10 hectares, and then to provide for only limited subdivision outside of that. So that was the policy direction that was set at that
Right, so
time.
it was our district plan that limited that then?
Yeah, in
Yeah.
terms of 1 and 2, yeah.
Right, okay, thank you. And we're not going to be looking at that until when?
So we are looking at doing the rural part of the district plan review next as the next plan change. So looking towards the end of the year to start that process.
But central government has overridden that anyway, and unless they get class 3 land out.
So they're winding that back, as
yeah.
we understand it, but 1 and
But-
2 soils is still.
Still, the class 3 land will not, the southern part of our district, most of that land will be class 1 or 2, won't it?
It's something that we're exploring with the regional council currently.
Right.
What I
you.
would say is, in terms of a rural zone and subdivision discussion, council will obviously need to consider the fact that this is a rural district. And a vast amount of our economy is based on our rural land holdings. And so when you're considering rural subdivision, you'll need to assess what's appropriate in terms of how much land you wanted to provide for that rural living kind of offering.
Look
versus-
at Manawatu, and they are probably more productive than us. And
Obviously not with the rural living subdivisions, but yes, their rural land is of a similar productivity as ours, yes.
more, I suggest, and so they've still managed to manage that subdivision, take the front bit off and still productively do the rest, very effectively and growing their districts substantially.
What we can do when we get to that rural zone plan change is have a look at our context. We'll do the efficiency and effectiveness for our context. And then we'll be able to compare that to what our neighbours have done as well, both Manawatu, but also Wanganui, Honowhenua,
Yeah.
to see how their policy levers, what they had and what impact that's had.
That would be really awesome. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Anything else, Tiffany? So just
So
from
I've wrapped up in terms of where I.
okay, so I'd just like to say thank you for the report. It's been really interesting to get all of that info in there. Glad that the team around the table have been able, the councillors around the table have been able to put some questions directly to you. This was just an information receiving of your report.
Yep.
So there are no decisions to be made around it. But I'd like to have a mover, please, for receiving the report. Thank you, Councillor Moore. Seconder. Thank you, Councillor Lambert. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Carried. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
7.3 is policy bylaw work program update. And that is going to be, who's taking us through that? Jana. Thank you, Jana. Well, I'd just like to say that I'm going to take that everyone has read this report. Just so that you don't necessarily have to take us through every single part of it. But potentially anything that you want to highlight.
So the policy and bylaw register is attached, so you will be able to see where each of our policies and bylaws are currently sitting. You'll be aware that at our last committee meeting, you recommended to council that the draft smoke-free and vape-free policy, along with the draft public signs and public places policy, is adopted for consultation, which has been through council and adopted. So that'll be happening after we get through the LTP hearings. And then the main thing I wanted to talk about today was the drone policy that we are starting. Yep, so the report goes through the basics there. So I guess the one thing I did want to discuss today was whether or not there was anything that you'd like included in the policy in terms of providing permission or not providing permission for drones to be flown in certain places.
Comments, thank you.
No, just because, so we're dictated by the CAA rules, basically. So
So-
when we're tweaking it, how much are we,
So
I mean,
the
I
C-
can't think of anything of, I think this covers it, but it's more,
The CAA rules outline how people are able to operate their drones.
Yeah.
The purpose of the policy is to pretty much provide permission for people to fly drones on council lands, so they don't have to come seek our permission every time someone wants to fly a drone.
okay.
Questions? Councillor. Okay.
Yes, thank you for this. There's a lot of work in here. The tiny typo, but it doesn't matter. But so page 21, well, the discussion around all cemeteries are excluded. I had an initial thought that if there was, for instance, a large tangi and it needed to be filmed, for someone to come to council and ask permission and to fill out lots of forms at such a highly emotive time might be a problem. And then I thought about the other family on the other side of the cemetery who were grieving for their person, and then the other person's drone is flying around above their head. So that was sort of a conflict for me, but I think I landed at the place where I agree that perhaps it should just be you request for permission if you need it. But on page 22, this happens in our park. So I've experienced walking through the Hotepu River parks and someone is flying a drone to film their own family or activities or whatever. But when you've got a potential to have dogs and horses, I wondered if such animals shouldn't be listed, because if someone had a drone, it could be very upsetting, especially for a horse. And we do have our horse facilities not far away from that park. You know, I don't, you know, and then do you put llamas in, you know? So then it gets all a bit sticky, but do you know what I mean? I just wonder if maybe domestic animals or domesticated animals or something like that should be included somewhere in that policy.
You can look into that.
Thank you.
There is, do not fly near livestock or other users
of
in the park. Mm,
Where does it say that?
Within 20 metres of other users of the park, including other flyers or drones or livestock.
Oh, I see, beg your pardon. So
Mm.
that's B of 4.
Mm.
Thank you, councillor Deputy.
Just a personal, question. Do we have to fly drones within human sight? Is that correct?
Yes, you have to be able to see the drone with your own vision.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other comments or feedback for Jenna?
Once again, it'll be an evolving thing. Once people start flying them, there could be something we missed and we'll just have to.
Do you think pizzas could be delivered?
They're a bit hard to fly and deliver a
Right,
pizza while
sorry.
keeping it on your visual side.
Yeah, that's what I
You
really
have
need
to
to
look fairly
ask.
close to it.
The biggest thing that I would say is that the enforcement of it. This is all very well to say that you can do this and you can do that, but these,
Yeah.
yeah.
You're not even allowed to shoot them down.
Through you, Chair, one of the many things that we have many policies for is to give the council staff and the regulatory team the ability to enforce should a complaint of some nature arrive. And that is really one of the founding reasons why we have these policies. So that should a nuisance being caused, we can refer back to a policy and signal to whoever that person may be doing it, what the breach is and what implications there may be. But without having it, then we do not have that ability. And many of our policies are like that, to just give us the ability. And obviously with this one, we don't have that ability at this stage, hence the this coming to us.
Any other comments?
That's good.
I'm just going to go through here. This was just a, Jenna, this is just us accepting your report. And just if there is any other thinking, sorry.
Was just looking at the time frame. Was that appropriate in the time frame on this report, the policies for review? Are we in the work program update, which is a part of this report? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I just wondered if I could get a little bit of clarity, and I'm not sure if the appropriate staff are in the room, particularly around our procurement policy. I know there's been a lot of discussion about that, and I also note, and sadly I've just seemed to have gone offline on my tablet here, but I think it says due for review 24. I'm wondering if we could signal, or I would like to signal, that I think our procurement policy be reviewed, and which would lead us to a discussion around the procedures that follow out of that policy. And I think given the amount of capital works and the amount of, particularly the capital works in our build program, and councillors' desire to push on with some of that going forward, and what we've already signalled or are signalling in our long-term plan, that a bit of a review or an understanding of not only the policy, but the procedure that flows out from it, and how decisions from this table tie into the overall of that. And I see it's noted as being 2024. I wouldn't want to see this being popped up in November, for example, and that being pushed out to 25 and beyond. I said there's no time limit requirement on it, but I do believe that I would like to see that, if possible with staff time, that come forward I note it's got a hierarchy of a medium as per my earlier conversation. And I think there should be a little bit more, don't know about urgency, but I'd like to see some sort of timeframe that could come back to this committee.
Yeah, thank you, councillor Wilson. And so Katrina?
Yeah, so it is currently under active review at the moment. The urgency from this committee, but actively under review at the moment.
Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Wilson, for bringing that up, because what had dropped out of my head, because I had previously had a discussion about this, was just, I was just interested in the bylaws and the register, bylaw register, and within it, the how do things, I know there'll be a process that's in place when it comes to the removal of some of those bylaws. Can you just enlighten me as to, it's not a simple, we're getting rid of that?
Yeah, so certainly in terms of a bylaw process, you do actually have to formally consult on revoking a bylaw. The easier process is where it lapses. There is a bylaw sitting in there, the Mokai Bridge bungee jumping bylaw. That is kind of doing just that at the moment in terms of lapsing. And if the committee's interested, we can bring you back some commentary around that one for the next meeting.
Thank you. I'd be interested in mainly because the review was meant to happen 12 months ago. For that in particular, so it will be interesting to.
Obviously that one has been sitting there in terms of lapsing, as it's no longer in use.
Yeah. So just another question then. So that means, despite that, you still have to go through go out for consultation with any of those bylaws or anything.
Yeah, if you wanted to formally revive.
Thank you. So can I have if there's no other questions for Jenna? Councillor Duncan. Sorry. So councillor Duncan is moving, that the policy bylaw work program update be received. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, councillor, Lambert. All those in favour say aye. Carry. We're moving down now. Thank you, Jenna, to the economic wellbeing update and the floors.
Thank you. I will take the report as being read, but I would like to just note that this is the first one of its kind from the strategy and development team and for myself, so I would welcome any feedback if there are any additions or anything in there that you feel is not relevant going forward, and we would like to make this a regular one as per the terms of reference workshop earlier. I would just like to also mention in relation to the economic update, point 2.4, the OCR review announcement this week did hold the OCR at its current position of 5.5%. And would also just like to draw your attention to really talk through some of the information we've got in around town centre revitalisation for the Better Off funding that we've received. You'll recall that council has received 200,000 to revitalise the town centres for, in particular, wayfinding and placemaking. The initial phasing of that was to be Martin first, followed by Taihape and then Bulls. As a result of the decision to move library services and council's new build here at 46 High Street, all of the work that had been currently done was to really do some placemaking at the library. However, that it's sort of become prudent that we actually put that on hold until we know what happens with that particular site. And what we're really looking for is an endorsement from this committee to put Martin on pause and progress the work that we've done on Bulls and Taihape, which we believe can be done at the same time. That would require really an endorsement from this committee to do so. We wouldn't require an elected member lead like we did with Martin, because there are a fewer number of elected members. So we'd work with all the elected members for those two wards representing those towns directly and the community group. So really just looking for that endorsement from this committee, but I'd welcome any questions about the report in general as well.
Is there any plans for Bulls and Taibi's upgrade? Yeah, like vision or whatever, yeah, like we talked about the Martin one.
Oh, sorry, when you say we'll talk about the Martin.
Oh, well, we talked about Martin having, the revitalisation and, getting a plan together before we start. Or is it completely
Are
different?
you referencing the town centre upgrade that's
Yeah.
Key Choice 3?
Yeah,
These are two separate projects, separate pieces of work.
okay, so, but is there plans, like, have they got a vision of what they want to do in these two towns?
So there were town centre plans that were created for all of our towns, that are on our website. Part of this is to pick those up and have a look and see what was in there, but also work with community groups who are on the ground in those towns. We're not talking about a huge amount of money, so the last thing that we want to do is have designs drawn up and things like that, because you'll chew up all of that money without ever delivering anything. So this is about acting swiftly and quickly to deliver outcomes that improve the wayfinding and placemaking of those towns.
Okay.
There has been work and conversations had initially to start those conversations, to get a bit of an idea. And I'd say we're more advanced with Bulls at the moment, just with regards to what the plans are through the community group there. We've got the arrangement with.
Okay, I'll just, going back to councillor Dalgetty's comments earlier on about the Martin revamp, quite a few years ago. So, yeah, about it not being fit for purpose now.
Mm.
And whether we don't
Now, I'm
want to
getting a
follow
little
the
bit
same-
confused here. Sorry, because, so you had plans for Martin, for the library. I'm not clear in my mind where we're at. Because when I was looking at this, I was thinking about the Main Street, which is obviously, I now realise is different from this. What were you thinking about doing at the Martin? And so then I'm going, and what are you thinking about doing at Bulls and Taihape? I'm not feeling in touch.
So the funding that we've received was for the delivery of some revitalisation projects.
Yeah.
So predominantly around placemaking and wayfinding. So
So does that mean signage in my walls?
in theory, that will form a part of it, absolutely.
Yeah.
Some artwork, something that sort of helps with the revitalisation, the look and feel of it. Whereas the Key Choice and the long-term plan is a completely separate piece of work.
Still with better off funding though, isn't it? But just,
Yeah, excuse, we're just gonna stop for a second
Yeah.
and just breathe. I feel like that, the questions that are getting asked you specifically around that, maybe we need a little bit more information so that I'm actually going to ask for, some advice from the deputy mayor.
Thank you, Chair. I think I can perhaps help clarify where some of the
Sorry, thank you.
confusion had arisen. We were given off better off funding in a larger sum of money than what's been indicated in the order paper. There was a discussion around the council table middle of last year, or even perhaps this time last year, as to how that funding could be spent. And this portion of money was identified when we applied for the money, because we had to apply for the better off funding.
Yeah.
And we said we would be doing these things with that money. This was a portion that we said we would spend the money on, along with some other work, which just escapes me, as part of that we did at that time. And I think Mr. Kalkin has clearly identified that we were quite keen to do something within the library space, and the wayfinding was also about signage, but it was also about storytelling and a number of other ideas that had been bounced around at the time, but they were never locked into place. They were just suggestions, I think, that we threw around at a workshop. What I believe Mr. Kalkin is now telling us, and I do agree with what he's saying, is that it's not prudent to be looking at that level of investment on our initial stage of Martin at this stage, subsequent to our decisions that we've made around where we will be going with our developments on the site that we're currently in. So I think that's where the confusion has come from. And whilst the Better Off funding and the 200,000, it is wrapped up in a bigger pot of money that we applied for Better Off funding. And this is just one part of it. I think there was also something about
But the bridges and all that whole thing
yes. So this is just a small section of that meeting that was held.
from the 200,000 that we're spending on planning with the centre revitalisation.
No, this is not part of that.
Well, can't some of this money go?
It's already been tagged and funded to the application that we did through to the government for its funding. So we must remember that what's one of our key choices is a completely separate discussion to this. And that is a discussion that is yet to be consulted on by council as a whole. So it does not form any part of the report that's in front of us now.
Thank you for that clarity, councillor Wilson. Councillor Duncan, you had a question?
Yes, I was just on that note also, it interested me that during the consultation process, the mayor was discussing how this particular $200,000 and that $100,000 of it would be spent initially on a plan for Martin. So I would like to see how that pans out with 3 towns and $200,000. However,
Yeah, thank you.
yeah.
So just to clarify that, the town centre key choice 3 is $2.1 million. $100,000 of that was for the plan, which is separate from this $200,000,
Thank you.
which 60 for Martin, no, 60 for Bulls and Taihape, 80 for Martin.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any other questions around this?
One more question.
Yep.
Are we using the Better business case that was done for Martin as and the time fee to feed into what you're talking about consulting and making a plan around it? Is what came out of those Better business cases that the council did a couple of years ago? It was around the buildings, but it was also around how the community saw the use of the space in the townships. Is any of that information being used?
So I can probably provide some context there in terms of there'll be a lot of information feeding into these projects, and think of them as very small scale projects compared to anything else. So we've got our town centre plans, we've got the community spatial plan, we've got other consultations we might have done that might help feed into these projects. But the direction we got given from council was, we want projects implemented from this money. We do not want you to create plans. We want you to implement projects. So we will not be creating plans. We will be implementing those projects. So speak signage, wayfinding, storytelling, community art, those type of projects.
Councillor Wilson,
I'm looking to remove receipt chair, if I may.
seconder, please. So we're going to the report, the wellbeing update we received. Councillor Wilson's moving, seconder. Councillor Lambert, all those in favour say aye. Aye. All right. Recommendation 2.
Sorry, I've got some questions,
Oh, yes.
not related to that part of the report. Is that okay?
Problem one.
Thank you for the report. I really like this committee for this information. I think it is fantastic, and really value having that put in front of us. Thank you very much. Just interested in terms of the Mayor's Task Force for Jobs and the downturn in sheep and beef particularly. Is that affecting their placements at all, or no? Because what I'm effectively asking is how are many of their placements go into that sort of work or not?
I would say that they are well connected into that space. The contract that they hold with council is one of the contracts that they hold, and another one is directly involved into that agricultural sector. they've not explicitly told us that there is any direct correlation that a downturn in sort of the challenges in that agricultural sector is having an impact, and their results wouldn't suggest that either.
Oh, brilliant.
But it is something that I'll take as noted and just raise that at our monthly catch-ups to get a better understanding.
Follow-up question, it was actually, I would like to have asked the mayor this, but in terms of that, sustainability of that funding, are we battering our local MP about this? Or how do we, what are we doing to, it's been so successful in our district. What are we doing to let central government know that we really value that service?
So I can explain from our perspective that we continue to be an advocate for the program, and in particular the work that our contractor and the results that they're delivering have. And I also understand that at a political level, those conversations are ongoing as well.
Cool, thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Looking at recommendation 2, Chair, through you, I'd like to move recommendation 2.
Second, please. Councillor Lamber. All those in favour say aye.
I
Thank you.
just also say thank you, Jared. Fabulous report.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I agree.
Yes.
Can I just ask a question of Jared about his report? Page 22, 2.4 of your forecast. It reads like the peak of the interest rates at 5.5% will plateau. And the bottom end it says, but relief will be realised over the medium term. What is a medium term in your opinion?
So the basically what we're suggesting there is that the banks are all suggesting that they're all in agreement that the peak has passed and we will see a reduction in interest rates with some relief coming towards the back end of the year. But a relief from the bank's perspective doesn't automatically flow through to the borrower because it's dependent on when their fixed rates come off. So if they're fixed for a 36-month term, a 3-year term, they won't get the benefit of that relief until much later. So the medium term is that sort of 12 to 36-month period, with long term being 4 years in view.
Questions? Any more questions? I'd just like to apologise actually, in putting this forward, given that we'd moved 2 recommendations and then we kept coming back into questions again. What I'm going to say is that in future, I will be making sure as chair that we try and ensure that all questions get asked at the one time, as opposed to we're moving recommendations and then people come back in with questions. So I'm taking that as that was my responsibility to sort, and I didn't. So I'm just taking that on board. But I'd also just like to say regarding the report, I want to acknowledge those councillors that have been through your report and weren't able to be here today, and the feedback that has been given back to, and just to say I think that's been great, and just listening to the feedback you've had around the table, the quality of the report that you've given. There's obviously still questions that people are asking and need clarity on, but we look forward to your next report coming to us. So thank you. We're going to move forward. 7.6. 7.5. Strategy plan development and review update. Who's taking us
I'll
through
take you
that?
through
Thank
this
you,
one.
Katrina.
So it's relatively brief this month. The purpose of having this on here is just to keep in your mind the strategy and plan work that we've got on this financial year. You've had an update from Ms. Gower earlier about the urban growth plan change. We're doing a lot of work in terms of the long-term plan. Another thing to note is we are working on the National Planning Standards implementation, which is effectively where we take our district plan and put it into the national template. We're required to do that by this year. And as part of that, I've been looking into the potential e-plan implementation. So it's probably been quite a while since we've had a discussion about e-plans, but effectively that's the online plan that makes it much easier for people to navigate around our district plan. So hopefully by June, I'll have an update on that for you as well. And then also important to note is since our last meeting, the Climate Change Strategy and Action Plan has been adopted by council. But happy to answer any questions.
Questions, please. Thank you, councillor Dalgety.
Just we've got two strategies there, the heritage strategy and the economic development strategy that just don't have any months in 2024, and I just wasn't comfortable with that. I'd much rather know when in 2024.
Thank you.
Yeah, certainly. So a couple of comments on them. Obviously, we've got Mr. Calkin at the table. That is due for this year, given his recent start time with us. So we're going to give him a few months to settle in, and the aim is to have that reviewed or at least well through the review by the end of the year, so end of 2024. The heritage strategy sits there as something that needs to be done, is a little bit overdue, but that one's waiting for the strategy and development team to increase capacity to support the review of that. So you'll recall as part of the long-term plan discussions, workshop discussions, that there was the concept of bringing all strategy plan making into the strategy and development team. So that one's awaiting that. So work is not due to start on that until late 2024. And that one would also be wrapped up in a review of what strategies do we really need to achieve our strategic framework.
Okay.
Comments, questions? Okay. Thank you for the Katrina. Can I have a mover to receive the report, please? Moved by councillor Lambert, seconder, councillor Duncan. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Carried. 7.6 Coalition Government Action Plan, 1 April to 30 June 2024.
Yep, I'll take you through this one as well. So at your last meeting, we put forward the 100-day action plan from the coalition government. This is the plan that's happened after that. So what we thought was really important was for this committee to really be on top of, okay, what are the key changes the government's making that are going to affect council or have an impact on council. So I've pulled out under section 3.2 some bullet points around areas that are likely to have an impact for us as local government, just so you can have them top of your mind. It is likely that some of those processes would have their own submission processes for legislative changes. So, for example, legislation to amend the RMA around National Policy Statement on Freshwater, that would have its own submission process. Same with the significant natural areas. So this is just to keep you in the loop around where the government's going strategy-wise that could have an impact on.
Thank you, councillor Dalgety.
I'm sorry, I couldn't work out what MDRE stands for. Number 5 and 3.2.
So my apologies on that. They're the medium density residential standards that the government brought in a couple of years ago. They don't impact us as a district.
Questions? Comments?
I just wondered on page 31. Sorry, have we got that bar? I got a bit distracted. Whether we have a few memorial parks in the Rangitikei. I wonder if that should say Taihape or whether that is the only memorial park. Sorry, the boxes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Sorry.
Six,
Are you
sorry,
on,
in
are we
the-
on 7.6 or have you gone back?
Yeah.
You've gone backwards.
Have I?
Yes. You definitely have. We're
Oh,
on
am I 7.5 still?
yes.
Beg your pardon?
So
Beg your pardon, sorry, don't
Yeah.
just
I'm
scrub
gonna
that.
ask you to-
I'll put it down on a little note.
we might be able to ask that question
Beg
to
your pardon.
Katrina after.
thank you.
So,
Oh, I have a question.
yes.
MDRS, can you just remind me what that means?
Your mind's still on the Bosch shop.
I was back up
Medium
now.
density?
Yeah.
Medium density.
Housing.
medium density.
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh, dear.
Any
Did you get what you wanted on trade me?
I wish. I wish.
Any other questions, please, to do with this topic?
I'll move that the report be
Thank
received.
you. Councillor Moore moving. A seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Wilson. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Carried.
Can I have a question?
No, you can't.
Well done, councillor. You're right.
Good try. Discussion item, submission to the Horizons Regional Council 2024-34 long-term plan. Thank you, Katrina.
So I'm pulling together the submission for the Horizons Regional Council long-term plan. In the background section, I've given you all of the issues that they're consulting on for reference and the link to their document. And then in the officer comment, I've proposed a few areas for a submission. The submission would come from His Worship the Mayor and you as council. So I'll run through those, but then I'm also really keen to hear if there are any other topics that you think as council we should be submitting on. So issue 1A, the first one is highly productive land regional mapping exercise. So the regional council has to map and put into the regional plan what is highly productive land. So currently we're working on an interim definition where we're using data that we're relying on to tell us what highly productive land is. The regional council has to do a mapping exercise and put that into their plan, and then that supersedes everything else. So this is really important for us as a district in terms of that exercise.
Can I just ask one question through Chair, if I may? You know, who puts the value on highly productive? You know, highly productive for what purpose? Are those questions being asked?
Yeah, so you'll see in 0.3.5, Horizons do have guidance around that. So that's in a general rural zone or rural production zone. That is predominantly LUC 1, 2 or 3 land. And you'll see I've put a note in the report around the coalition government's plans for class 3 land. And then C is really interesting. It forms a large and geographically cohesive area. Now the MPS for highly productive land does say that that they can map areas that aren't class 1, 2 or 3 if the region decides they're highly productive. So there is that potential that other areas could be mapped that aren't 1, 2 and 3 if they are considered to be highly productive. Now that would need evidence behind that to say that, but that's just.
I guess the question I'm really asking is productive based on just on what GDP or what's productive?
Soil type.
So is it LUC?
Yes,
It's
yeah,
not-
soil-
it's not-
for
it's
soil
only
type.
called that is, but it's
Yes.
based on.
Yes, but as that is for its production outcomes of those.
It's
those
based on
soils.
food.
It's a good point.
No, it's based on, isn't it, soil type and
Yeah.
topography and
Yeah,
it's more soil mapping.
the LUC
It
is,
a GDP process.
so it's not actually the economic.
Thank you. I'm just going to ask whether or not any of the staff have got any feed into that question or have any knowledge. You've got a number of farmers sitting around this table that understand this a lot more than me, but do you have any feed in at all?
Yeah, certainly. So the LUC classifications have a range of criteria that they consider. They consider like the soil wetness, slope, type of soils sitting in there to determine their effective versatility or productivity. So which are the soils that can be used for a really wide range of purposes.
Right, try going one at a time.
Joel, you go first.
Yes. Councillor Duncan.
My understanding is, taken down to the very simplest term, it's the versatility of the land to produce food. It's all around food production.
Thank you. Next.
Well, the prime example is what happened in the Hawke's Bay, when they built Flaxmere. They said, what is the most unproductive land we have in the, in the Hawke's Bay? Flaxmere, it's dry, it's stony, it's terrible, let's build the town there. Now, wine is outstripping Hawke's Bay's production in every other factor. The best place to grow wine is right under where Flaxmere's built. So that's
good.
point, Dave's point. If wool all of a sudden became worth $20 a kilo, hill country would all of a sudden become fairly productive land. So it's I know I agree with the soil types and that, but it can be viewed at different ways.
Carney,
Any other comments?
Yeah, so if we can bring it back to what we need to submit on, is how they're gonna do that mapping exercise. So they've set out 3 options. One is effectively to target mapping. So this is mapping that you would do to test that assessment that's already done, that high level assessment that's already done. So do you target around areas that are experiencing acute urban growth pressures? Do you target it, focus on areas where there's urban growth pressure and demand for rural lifestyle subdivision, which is their preferred option? And then option 3 is targeted mapping, focusing on land surrounding all existing urban areas. And obviously each of the options, the more mapping you do, the more expensive it is. We've worked regionally with the group on developing these options, and where the technical advice has been going with this is that it needs to be more than just growth focused. So agree that targeted, you can't map everything, it's cost prohibitive, but where that targeted mapping should occur should be based on a range of criteria that aren't solely growth focused. So it could be criteria such as uncertainty in the national data that we're currently using. It could be location, it could be areas where we know there's strong demand for papakāinga development, those type of criteria. So effectively what we're looking for is to submit on which is council's preferred option for how that mapping gets undertaken.
Thank you. What I'd like to say is that I feel like we could sit around the table and have, everyone's got a lot of, has knowledge around this, and sitting here discussing it now is, in my mind, not the way to do it. This report is something to be received only. There's no other recommendations, but what I would say is that when you have these types of things and you've got people around this table that understand it a lot better than I do, and you need to have a discussion, I don't feel that the discussion happens here. It needs to be brought into another arena to be able to really get into it. Otherwise we all start crossing over each other. So when is this due to, when are we due to put this on?
End of April.
So my suggestion would be that, well, I was going to suggest that we try and have another hui in it, or else people that have got some thoughts on it could come back to you. I'm going to start with Councillor Lambert only because he was hand up first.
Okay.
Then I'm going to come to you.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. Option 2, at the current time, that would probably be the most logical option to go with, in my opinion.
Could I also suggest through you, Chair, you've quite rightly identified that members just sitting around this table, but also members sitting around the our larger council table have a lot of interest in this, and I would say are quite knowledgeable, given their substantial farming backgrounds, and perhaps they could reach out to Ms. Gray, our staff member, with their thoughts on this submission that could perhaps formulate part of it, because their collective thinking may be the same. And that would also give His Worship the Mayor the opportunity to review those thoughts if he was copied in, so that when he's addressing the submission direct to Horizons, he will be aware of some of the concerns from councillors rather than another meeting as such, but perhaps councillors could feed direct to council staff with their thoughts on this report.
Thank you, councillor Wilson, councillor Dalgety.
Thank you, Ms Gray. I think your points under 3.10 is fantastic, and I really encourage you to fight hard for them.
Any, councillor Duncan?
I have a concern because it quite clearly says in the government's 30-day plan that they are going to push back on councils going ahead with the MPS on freshwater management. So I'm just wondering how much any of what we do now will have changed criteria in the next 30 days.
Are we up to that? Are you going to discuss that in a minute?
So it says here, I'm assuming that this, so just to clarify what I'm trying to get at, is Horizons is required to notify a plan change. That's twice written here in this document. 3.8 is one particularly. And
Were you going to go over those, or is it separately or not?
Yes, I can go
Yeah,
over
we're not
those
there yet,
separately. 3.8 is still sitting in highly productive land, so we're expecting changes when the government enters highly productive land. We're expecting them to remove class 3 as being considered for highly productive land. They haven't indicated any other changes.
so the mapping still.
But there may be changes to come. The suggestion in the submission is that we recommend the regional council proceed on the basis that class 3 is gonna be removed.
Yes.
Because that's their
Okay,
main
yes.
role in implementing highly productive land. As a district council, when we get to our district plan review for the rural section, we'll be looking at where that national policy statement's sitting.
Okay, right, thank you.
Questions?
So you're going over the other issues or not?
Yes, with the
Yes,
permission
yep.
of the chair. Certainly, we can move on to public transport. So, obviously there's interest in the room around the public transport space. So keen to hear any thoughts you suggest for that one. The suggestion is to support option 1, which is improve services for our district effectively, but actually the wider region. Noting the transport challenges faced by our residents and then trying to link back to the transport priorities in our community spatial plan. That could also be one that I received comments via email as well.
Yes.
Just a comment on that.
Yeah.
The initial proposal was wanting to include further branches north of Taihape to the Ruapahu district, but it didn't make it to the consultation document because it was outvoted because of cost, but in Taihape, in the northern area of the Rangitaki, we would encourage that, so we will support if they could extend it further north. We're riding on back of Waka Whanganui on a lot of these bus services because they are pushing for increased links, so they are opening to Martin for 7 extra connections each way, each day. So that's, Martin will be very, very well serviced if this plan goes, even if this plan goes ahead, and that's in the less than medium term, possibly 2-3 years. So, but whereas Taihape and our lives will be probably long term.
Eva.
It's well supported. Thank you. Yeah.
Councillor Dalgety?
I'm not sure if this is a question to the councillor who's taken great interest in this or yourself, but has there been any thinking about more of a shuttle type service, so downsizing the size of the bus so that it could be more flexible in what happens? Has that ever come across? We seem to be going bigger buses.
If you read my email,
No, well, you know I didn't. You said to you earlier. I didn't write that.
yes, there is a lot of discussion there. Yes, there is.
Thank you.
What about electric buses?
Palmerston's got a fleet.
If you'd read Jeff's email.
Thank you.
Oh, so the next topic is natural hazard data. This is kind of a random one. They're not consulting on this. But Horizons effectively takes the lead in providing our natural hazard data across the region. In some areas we have good flood model data, which is really useful in terms of our day-to-day planning. So it's a suggestion that we recommend Horizons complete additional natural hazard mapping for our district, particularly for the Pōrewa Stream, Hunterville, the Rangitiko River and the Hautapu River as well.
Any comments around them? Thank you, Trina.
Strongly support this. I think with the more freak weather events we're getting, very important. Yes, I'd strongly support we submit on that.
Right, and then the final one that we've chucked in there as a result of comments from the last council meeting was around the National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management and interest in that. Now, I have spoken directly with the officer at the Regional Council leading that process. Effectively, under the last government, they were on track to notify their plan changes this year. They've got a report going to that April council meeting around what to do. Do we keep going with our past plan of implementing it soon? Do we delay 2 years, 5 years, whatever all the options are? So I'm keen to get any comments back from the committee around if that was going to be something you wanted to submit on in terms of their long-term plan, that a better approach recommended is a letter from our council setting out our preferred option. So happy to take on board any positions or comments around that one.
Thank you, Trina. Councillor Dalgety?
I've got two concerns around this. First of all, when they went out to the community with their roadshow, they we haven't been exposed to any economic implications. There's no economic study done on the implication of this freshwater management plan, and I find that quite shocking. And secondly, I am concerned that with the state of the economics of sheep and beef farming particularly, but I mean dairy's not that good either. I think that throwing a whole lot of regulations at farmers at this time and needing a lot significant capital injection from farms that are not making any money is challenging. Yeah. So I would be encouraging a delay. Yeah.
Other comments, Councillor Duncan?
I'd like to support that position. And also given where this national government is looking to change things, I think it would be prudent to relax our not take the focus off it entirely, but to relax the view, have a relaxed view around how urgent this now is.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I tend to agree.
Great, and then it's just, is there anything else that you think we should be submitting on as council to the Horizons long-term plan that you want me to draft into the submission?
Councillor Wong?
The councillors had received a letter from Councillor Simon Loudon about air quality, which none of you is. It was a personal submission from him, but I believe it was quite important for improved air quality, and his comment was that the Horizons long-term transport plan addressed a number of health issues, but not actual particulate pollution from from diesel trucks, but also from house fires. And I thought if the rest of the council thought it was important, we should perhaps include something of that in the submission, but we haven't had a chance to talk about it yet. You haven't read it, have you?
Yes, yeah, it's been he circulated a couple of days ago. I'm aware of what you're talking about. Yeah.
So we haven't had a chance to discuss it as a, so we can't support it as a council to thing yet, but when is this? It's the end of the month, isn't it? So.
Yeah, so now as a committee, you could say, yeah, we think that's something that you should include in the submission. I'll go away and draft it into the submission because I will be circulating the draft submission to full council as per normal. So if I get some direction from even the members of this committee as to whether or not to draft something into that before I circulate a draft to full council, that would be useful.
So just for my clarity, any councillor, so this got, I'm just trying to figure this out in my head. So any councillor that wants to put in a submission for anything, I'm just trying to figure out how that process works. You might be able to help me, Councillor Wilson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So any council, like any citizen of our district, can put a private submission into into any plans or LTPs or long-term plans or whatever they may be. And the letter that was circulated that Councillor Wong refers to is a private submission that was submitted by Councillor Loudon for our reference, just to bring it to our attention. That's what he had sent through. But I have a little bit of a concern that we should be taking a private submission which has already been submitted to Horizons Regional Council on their long-term plan, and somehow weaving what is a private submission into our council submission, because they're two quite different focuses of where we need to sit. So I'm not quite sure that that would be appropriate. But I do thank Councillor Loudon for circulating his views on it, but I don't think it should be something that should be taken as an overall council view, because it may well be taken as that, which I don't think is quite correct.
Councillor.
Yeah, I'm on the same lines. I don't think it was, Simon was asking for us to include it in our submission or anything like that. It was more for information and you know, it's good information, but I don't think it's been top of our list, put it that way.
Thank you, Councillor Wong.
On the contrary, Simon did circulate to me at the beginning, but I thought it was important enough that to ask if it was council back, it would carry more weight. But of course, it depends on the opinion of the other councillors. Thank you.
And so that's probably was my question as to how does something that we put on personally from a councillor, how does it get put in to become, because there might be a number of us that have put in submissions personally or for organisations, and yeah, I just need to understand that in my head, because that doesn't seem, it's something that's not quite right in my mind.
Yeah, potentially I can provide some comment on
Thank you.
that. Council would only put it in council submission if you looked at it and thought that's actually a great idea. This is something our communities are really concerned about, and it's something we want to advocate for on behalf of them to the regional council. And you wanted it to be a council position. Certainly we wouldn't be wanting to incorporate single councillor views into a council submission.
Understand.
Councillor Wong.
Could I just add one more thing? As a parallel to this, there has been a number of inquiries through the Northern Ward about the smoke, that pall that hangs over the town when the air is very still, usually frosty nights, and everyone likes their fire. So this is an issue that perhaps we have been discussing for quite a while. Councillor Duncan has brought it to my attention before, and this would be perhaps a time. We're not looking at trying to ban fireplaces in Taipei, or we'd probably die. But it's an area that perhaps needs to be written somewhere, so it can be considered in the.
Thank you, Councillor Wong.
If I may again, Chair, perhaps a reference to air quality just be referenced in general in the submission rather than specifics, but
Yeah.
just air quality and the connection to health and wellbeing being referenced in our submission somewhere as an overview.
Thank you. Any other questions, please?
Just one question, I'm sorry, I can't support what Councillor Wong was saying because I haven't actually read the email from Councillor Loudon. I've been off air, so I'm sorry about that. But I just wanted to ask, is there anything that we're looking at around the water with the, I see that the bullet point 2 and 3, it talks, oops, no, wrong, on page 36, looks at planning for the future work program for integrated catchment management, and the next one, which is issue 3A and 3B, around freshwater activity. I just, is that, sorry, are we writing something like that?
It's certainly something, if you wanted to direct us to write it, we could write. It's not something I have pulled out as an
No.
obvious for submission, but absolutely the key issues identified. And if there were aspects of those proposals that you thought as a council we should be submitting on or requesting specific directions on, we can absolutely do that.
Yeah, can I just make a comment?
Think about that.
You've just said from council, so it feels it feels a little bit funny to me because we're making our personal thoughts about it, but then it's taken from what you're saying from council, but actually the discussion hasn't necessarily been had with every other person around the table or the rest of the councillors, and so that's I'm just trying to get that into my head. We've all got our own, everyone's got their own experiences and their own knowledge around some things. But where does it come from where it's one person to when it becomes everybody's experience of it? Councillor Moore.
I just think, if once the submission's drafted, then all councillors have a chance to read it and then decide feedback, I guess, and add their thoughts on what more could be added in. I don't know. I thought that was the process to involve all the other councillors. It's our job to sort of give some direction to Katrina of what goes in the submission. And she's come up with some ideas and.
Yeah, absolutely. It's totally appropriate for this committee to do the lead work around what could go in the submission, have some debate around what should go in or what shouldn't go in, because members are here as part of the committee representing as their role as a councillor. So you're not here giving your personal views, you're here giving views as a councillor. And so as a committee, totally appropriate to be able to doing the heavy lifting. We do also have the process where it goes out to everyone and make sure we get that shared view.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Happy to take more questions, just so that we can, yes.
I know, I was just going to comment.
Comments.
Councillor Moore right, but probably life would be simpler if they were in before the draft was drafted.
Well, it's up to our job to.
Yeah, no, but it's Katrina's point. Anything she didn't bring up today should get hot. You should let her know before the draft's done. So then it's easier to, you know.
Thank you, councillor Wilson.
Just with your approval, Chair, I wonder if it's appropriate to move receipt of this report.
All right, before we go there, I want to make sure that there's no other questions. Are we sure?
Hands behind your back.
No.
Yes.
Considering that we do have a big agricultural economy, is there scope in here about water takes and, I know they're looking at charging more for meters and stuff like that for water takes out of our catchments for irrigation and the like, or is that a whole separate?
If as a council you decide you want to submit on the water metering key topic, absolutely appropriate for council to represent a view from our council and from our district around that.
What about the impact, the actual
Yeah,
use of the water? Like
When they talk-
From bores.
All right,
Or-
let's just try and have one person speak at once, please. We're going to stay with you, Councillor
Yeah, I'm
Moore?
just thinking about the use of the water, surface water in particular out of the Ringatiki River or whatever for irrigation. Is that part of this submission, or is that what's there in their long-term plan? Or what is the Horizons, I guess, plan for irrigation and the like, for agriculture? Is there anything in it, or is it?
So potentially some context which might help answer the question. So their long-term plans, just like ours, it's how they're going to fund their activities and their services. Their rules around water takes under the RMA, so they're under their one plan.
Yep.
Does that answer?
Yes,
help answer?
yeah.
Councillor Dalgety?
The charges for the water meter in this long-term plan.
Charges are, yeah.
Yeah, I was just trying to understand is when they're talking about water metering, that's just in relation to water meters in urban situations. Is it or not?
I couldn't confirm that with you now. I haven't done a deep dive on that topic, to be
Okay.
honest. If it's, I can go away and have a look at it.
Thank you.
You think it is related to?
I would like you to
Oh.
give us some feedback on that, because if it's all irrigation water meters
Yeah.
around the country, around the district, as well as household ones.
Thank you. Councillor Lambert?
I'm done.
All right, are you sure?
I've got no questions. No, hands behind my back.
Councillor Duncan, have you got any questions around this?
No, excellent, thank you.
All right, so we have had a mover for the recommendation. That was Councillor Wilson. Can we please have a seconder?
No, too late. I'll put my hand up.
When does our feedback have to be in? That's my only question.
I'll send it to you by email and I circulate the draft submission. So
Thank you.
send it to me anytime. I'll send you specific dates when I circulate the draft.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. You've seconded it. All those in favour say aye.
Who seconded?
Councillor Moore.
Oh, yeah.
All right, I'm going to go around our table once. Please do not put pouncing on somebody else when they're talking. Katrina, anything to add?
Okay. Thank you.
Kezia? Jared? Councillor Duncan?
I have one thing I would like to bring up, and it's not specific to this paper, so if you want to let staff go, that's fine. But I have a problem with the fact that we had a workshop that talked about consultation and engagement as two separate things. And it was talking from the government's perspective and local government's perspective of what engagement and consultation are. And we are using consultation as the word that they would have said was engagement. And I would like to see that either we adopt consultation as that word or engagement, but I would like to see some sort of consistency in our use of those two words, because, yeah.
Thank you, and that was the hui that was had at the,
Yes.
and that was an excellent, it was actually a really good hui. I can't remember, at the sports field, wasn't it?
That's right, and
Yeah.
Martin.
Yeah, that sounds like a discussion we need to have offline to get the context. So thank
Excellent.
you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Councillor Duncan. Councillor Moore?
Nothing.
No, thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
But
Councillor
I just, once again, as I say every meeting, it is a pleasure to be part of such a vibrant, exciting committee. And I mean it. It's good. I really enjoyed policy and planning.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you to you, Chair.
Councillor Moore.
Oh, thank you, and thank you to Ms. Gray, Ms. Spence, Mr. Culkin. And
Ms.
quite
Spence.
impressive, yeah. But no, well done, it was a very good actually meeting.
And thank you, Chair.
And Chair.
No.
What I would like to see is that I look forward to seeing Councillor Dalgety and Councillor Wong's application coming into this committee. And thank you for your, Councillor Dalgety, for your brains and your experience and knowledge around a whole lot of things. And I think you are the chair of finance, and you bring, and I just want to acknowledge yourself and Councillor Wilson for the wealth of knowledge that you bring. And so I do look forward to you both putting your hands up to be part of this policy and planning. So in lieu of that, just thank you everybody for being here. It is now 3:29, so that was, what's that? 2 hours in the sui. I thought we might be finished a little bit earlier. And I'm going to close our hui with karakia. And thank you all and see you in, all right, next meeting. Actually, before we do that, when is our next meeting?
13th of June.
13th of June. So 13th of June, policy and planning 1 PM. So look forward to seeing your two names on the papers as actual members and of kaisa so for karakia. He inoi tātou kia tau, kia tātou katoa. Te atu whai o tō tātou ariki a ihi karaiti, me te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhinga tahitanga, ki te wairua tapu, mō ake, āmini.
Thank you.